There's a specific kind of person walking through today's world carrying something invisible. It is a memory. Not just any memory, but the lived experience of a fundamentally different reality. They remember life before the internet, and that memory shapes their psychology in ways most people will never understand. If you're someone who remembers what it felt like to be truly unreachable, to live without constant connectivity, and to exist without documenting every moment, you're carrying a psychological framework that is slowly becoming extinct. And that framework affects everything about how you see the world today. Let's talk about what living in both worlds does to your mind. You remember boredom. Real, heavy, analog boredom. The kind where you'd lie on your bed staring at the ceiling for an hour with nothing to distract you, no phone to check, no endless scroll to fall into. Just you, your thoughts, and the slow, rhythmic passage of time. And here's what nobody talks about. That boredom wasn't empty. It was generative. Because there was no external feed to fill the void, your mind had to become its own engine. Your mind would wander into uncharted territories. You'd daydream with a vividness that felt like a second life. You'd come up with ideas, stories, and questions that didn't need a search bar for an answer. Your brain would entertain itself because it had no other choice. People who remember life before the internet developed something rare: the ability to be alone with their thoughts without anxiety. You develop the capacity to sit in stillness without needing external stimulation. Today, that ability is nearly gone. We see people panic when their phone dies or feel a physical discomfort in silence. But you remember what it felt like when your mind was enough, when silence was normal, when being alone didn't mean being lonely, it meant being free. You remember what it felt like to wait. Not the frustrated 3 seconds while a web page loads, but real, physical waiting. You waited weeks for a letter to arrive in the mail. You waited days or months to see a photo you took, having no idea if it even turned out well until the envelope was opened. You waited an entire week to see what happened next in your favorite show, with no way to binge the next episode. Through that waiting, you learned something crucial that today's world has forgotten: patience and anticipation. You learned the deep psychological understanding that good things take time and that the process of waiting often makes the reward significantly sweeter. Psychologists call this delayed gratification, and research consistently shows it is linked to better emotional regulation, stronger focus, and greater life satisfaction. People who remember the pre-internet era developed this naturally because the world demanded it. You couldn't skip ahead. You couldn't fast forward. You had to sit with the uncertainty and learn to be okay with it. Today, as you watch people lose their composure when a text isn't answered immediately, you feel that old, familiar patience inside you. A nervous system built before instant became the default setting of humanity. Before the internet, your mistakes had the grace of disappearing. That embarrassing thing you said at a party, that awkward phase of your adolescence, that terrible haircut, they existed in memory and nowhere else. There were no photos posted online for strangers to judge decades later. There was no permanent digital record, no trail following you forever. Your past could actually stay in the past. This allowed for a type of psychological growth that is becoming impossible. You could reinvent yourself, you could move to a new town and be whoever you wanted to be because nobody could Google your previous version. People who remember this carry a different relationship with privacy and shame. You understand that not everything needs to be shared. You know that mistakes can fade and that embarrassing moments do not have to define your brand forever. You were allowed to outgrow who you used to be without the digital world constantly reminding you of your former skin. This creates a psychological freedom where you do not feel like you are performing for an audience 24/7. You remember what it felt like to just be a person, not a profile. You remember when connection required effort and intention. If you wanted to talk to someone, you had to call their house phone and risk talking to their parents first. If you wanted to see a friend, you had to make plans days in advance and actually show up, trusting they would be there too. If you wanted to maintain a relationship, you had to put in real, tangible work. There was no liking a photo to maintain the illusion of a bond. There was no following someone to keep them in your life without ever speaking to them. Connection required commitment, and this created deeper, more resilient relationships. When connection was harder to achieve, it meant more. You couldn't maintain 50 friendships through occasional comments. You had to choose who mattered. You had to decide who was worth the effort. People who remember life before the internet often have smaller social circles but significantly stronger bonds. You learned early that real connection takes time, energy, and physical presence. Today, you watch people claim hundreds of friends while feeling profoundly lonely because they've confused contact with connection. You know that real intimacy requires the very thing the internet promised to eliminate: effort. You remember when information was scarce and, therefore, sacred. If you wanted to know something, you had to go to a physical library. You had to look it up in a heavy encyclopedia or find someone who might know the answer. Some questions just stayed questions for days. Some mysteries remained unsolved, living in your mind as puzzles to be contemplated. This created a different cognitive framework. You valued information because it was hard to earn. You remembered things because you couldn't just look them up later. You developed critical thinking because you had to evaluate your few sources carefully. Today, every question is answered in seconds by a machine. Every mystery is solved immediately. Every debate ends with someone pulling out their phone to settle the score. And in that process, something beautiful has been lost. The ability to sit with not knowing. The patience to wonder. The comfort with mystery. Your brain was shaped in an era where the journey to the answer was as important as the answer itself. You remember when being unreachable was the norm, not an emergency. You could leave your house and nobody could find you. You could take a vacation and actually disconnect from the demands of your daily life. You could have a bad day without having to explain your absence to a dozen different people across various platforms. There was no expectation of constant availability, no guilt about not responding to a message within minutes. People who remember this carry a different nervous system. You understand that you don't owe the entire world immediate access to your mind. You know that your time and attention are yours to control. Today, the expectation of constant connectivity creates chronic stress. People feel panicked when they're out of service or anxious when they can't check their phone. But you remember the peace of disappearing for hours without consequence. This creates a psychological resilience that allows you to disconnect without fear. You can exist in the present moment without constantly checking if there is a better moment happening elsewhere. Here is the weight you carry that nobody talks about. You live in a world that is fundamentally different from the one that shaped your soul. Every day, you navigate a level of connectivity and visibility that didn't exist during your formative years. You've adapted, you've learned the new rules, but you also remember what was lost in the transition. You remember the slowness, the depth, the privacy, the real, generative boredom. You watch a new generation growing up who will never know what it means to be truly unreachable. They will never experience a life that isn't documented. This creates a unique kind of grief, not for your youth, but for a way of being human that is being erased. You are witnessing the colonization of every quiet moment by digital noise. But your memory is not a burden. It is a gift. You are one of the last people who carries the proof that another way of living is possible. You know that life can be full without being shared, and that presence is more valuable than proof. You're not out of touch. You're one of the last people who remembers what touch actually felt like before it became a swipe on a cold screen. You are carrying forward a truth that the present world desperately needs to remember, that technology should serve our lives, not consume them, and that is a wisdom worth protecting.